There comes a moment in a person's life when the light of knowledge no longer illuminates and the hands of God no longer hold. There's only a silent shadow whispering behind the mirror of the soul. In that moment, Nietzsche stepped forward and gazed into the abyss. So did I. I cannot forget the first time I touched the pages of Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Each line reverberated as if from the collective shadow, what I call the unconscious. But for Nietzsche, it was the place where God is dead and the Übermensch arises from the ashes of revelation. I do not judge him. How could I? I felt the trembling in my own heart, as though I, too, were wading into that same abyss where the light of reason fades, and only the breath of ancient symbols remains. Dionysus, Prometheus, and the nameless wanderer. Have you ever stood before a misty mirror, not to gaze at your face, but to see what lurks behind you? Nietzsche did that, and I, too, have bowed before that mirror of the abyss. For behind the light of reason lies the unreconciled shadow, fear, madness, divinity, the serpent, the light, and the abyss. Nietzsche called it overcoming oneself. I call it individuation, the process in which the soul ventures into the darkness, engages in dialogue with ancient archetypes, and is reborn. But not everyone returns from that journey. I write these words not to explain Nietzsche, but to speak to you, standing at the edge of the abyss, in life or in dreams, that there is a second path. A path that does not deny the depths, but descends into them as a miner of light. And Nietzsche, like a blind prophet, showed me that path through paradox, through pain, through confrontation with the shadow of divinity itself. Every step toward the light is a step back into the darkness. This I learned not from books, but from the wordless screams in my visions, and from Nietzsche. Nietzsche, more than any thinker of the modern age, dared to touch the shadow of the divine. He did not evade it with theology, suppress it with morality, or explain it away with science. He let it erupt like a divine Zeitzerer, and in that moment, he did not fall into the abyss. He became the abyss. This is terrifying for most of us, those who seek stability, salvation, or at least a place to anchor faith. But for me, Nietzsche became an archetype of one who steps out of cultural assimilation and dares to bring light from the shadow. That shadow is Dionysus, the god of wildness, of rupture, of the sacred fire that burns through the old structures of consciousness. Within me, I once dreamed of a horned man, bare-chested, emerging from a deep forest, an archetype, alive and vivid. I did not name him, but later, when writing the Red Book, I realized he was Dionysus within me, as he was Nietzsche's Dionysus. And as long as we have not met him, not let him burn through our ego, we remain mere mask wearers, living in fragmented structures. The abyss Nietzsche saw was not nihilism, it was the unformed essence. It was the primordial self, not yet reconciled with logos, with form and order. When he declared, God is dead, I do not read it as a curse, but as a tolling bell for a religious symbol that had grown obsolete, no longer capable of connecting the human soul to the archetypal source. And in that void, where the modern world feels lost, Nietzsche called forth a new god, the Übermensch, not a ruler of others, but one who overcomes oneself, but who dares to walk that path without going mad. And here is where I part ways with Nietzsche, for he stepped into the abyss and dissolved while I had to bring the light back. I do not deny the shadow, but I do not let it swallow the soul. I record dreams. I dialogue with images. I reconcile Dionysus with Logos, darkness with light. And that this is the second path, the path of individuation. I have asked myself, and I ask you, what happens when the bridge between humanity and living symbols collapses? The answer does not lie in reason, for it is reason itself that has buried the capacity for symbol. Nietzsche saw this a century before us. When he said, God is dead, it was not a judgment, but a profound phenomenological diagnosis. The divine within us has died because we no longer know how to listen to symbols. And in that silence, the soul has no home. It wanders, stumbling, unable to distinguish dream from reality, the call of the unconscious from the cry of the ego. I have met many patients like this, not neurotic in the medical sense, but severed from symbols. A woman dreamed she was trapped in a room without doors, with only a blurred painting hanging on the wall, a classic image of a soul imprisoned in the rational world. A student dreamed he was climbing a mountain, only to find its peak was a heap of garbage, and he had to dig to find a burning heart amidst the chaos. These dreams do not speak in logical language. They are the language of the soul, and only symbols can translate them. When Nietzsche rejected God, he did not reject the soul. On the contrary, he cried out in desperation for the soul to be born anew, this time not through dead formulas, not through dogma or morality. He called it the Übermensch, but I call it the living symbol. For the soul cannot exist without images. It needs an altar, however crude. It needs a sacred forest, akave, a flame, not for worship, but to be illuminated from within. I, too, have fallen into the abyss. Nietzsche faced. In the Red Book, I recorded my dreams when I met Elijah and Salome, symbols of ancient wisdom and the dark feminine principle. I did not follow them with reason. I listened to them as voices from the collective unconscious, as whispers of an ancient soul unclouded by time. I no longer saw truth through logic, but through symbols, through images that emerge when reason ceases to dominate. And in that state, I was no longer lost. The symbol is the only light when all systems of knowledge fail. It is a small flame in the cave of the soul flickering, fragile, but enough to illuminate a path. It is not a path out of the abyss, but a path through it. Like Orpheus descending into the underworld to find Eurydice. And if you ask me why descend into the abyss, I will answer, as I have written, no one is enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Nietzsche stopped where he saw the abyss as everything, and thus he dissolved. But I sought to transform the abyss into a symbol. And from there, I move forward, and I invite you, listening to me now, to move forward with me. At a certain point in the journey into the abyss, you will no longer encounter philosophies. You will encounter yourself, not the self you present to the world, but the part you have denied, forgotten, feared. I call this the shadow. And I have seen it not only in the dreams of my patients, but in my own psyche. One day, while drawing a mandala, a sacred circle representing the center of the soul, I noticed that its edge was broken by a dark, distorted figure. It did not conform to proportion, did not harmonize with the symbol, yet it did not vanish. It was present like a crack, like the eye of a storm in the structure of the self. When I closed my eyes, I saw a nameless man, hair disheveled, mouth full of blood, whispering, "I am you." But abandoned in that moment, I understood the shadow is not something we can eradicate. It is the severed part of the ego, demanding integration. Nietzsche did not pause to do this. He recognized the shadow. He embraced Dionysus, but he did not bring Dionysus into dialogue with Logos. He chose one side and killed the other. But the essence of transformation lies not in extremes, but in integration. In myself, I had to make Dionysus and Logos sit face to face in the same image, in the same symbolic ritual. Once I drew a round table where Dionysus drank wine with an Arab sage, a symbol of ancient Eastern wisdom. They did not argue, they sat in silence. And in that silence, I heard the footsteps of the true self approaching. The shadow is the unilluminated Dionysus, and Logos is not its negation, but the formalization of intuition. If you live only in Dionysus, you will be consumed by wildness, by ecstasy, by the howl of unformed instinct, as Nietzsche was ultimately swallowed by the symbol he could not navigate. But if you live only in Logos, you become a hollow specter, rigid, empty, cut off from the primal stream of life. Reconciliation happens when you look at the shadow, not as an enemy, but as a brother in exile. You listen to it, write about it, draw it to dream it, and finally sit beside it. I once wrote, "The shadow you do not integrate will lead your life, and you will call it fate." When you reconcile with the shadow, you are no longer controlled by it. You step into a new level of existence, where freedom comes not from negation, but from integration. The living symbol emerges in that moment, the moment you are no longer a victim of yourself, but a torchbearer descending into the underworld. You do not seek salvation, you seek wholeness. And when you touch the shadow Dionysus within you and place it face to face with Logos, your wisdom, what happens? A child is born. That is the self, the true self, not the social self, not the persona. The self is not a choice between instinct and reason. It is the sacred union of both. Then the abyss is no longer a threat. It becomes a cradle. If you have walked with me through the abyss, through Nietzsche's darkness, through the wild shadow and the integration of Dionysus and Logos, then you have also walked a path no thinker can fully show you. For the rest, the quietest, most private part is yours alone. You will have to descend again, not to destroy, but to recreate, and that will not happen through accumulating knowledge, but by listening to dreams, recording symbols, and observing the soul as if gazing at an ancient stream flowing through a forest where each ripple is an unformed whisper from within. I have drawn hundreds of mandala circles, spiraling like the eye of a storm, because I understood that only living symbols could hold me amidst opposing forces. And you can begin the same way, with a circle, an image, a spontaneous symbol. Draw what you see in your dreams. Describe your abyss. Who stands there? What does your shadow say? What do you carry? A hammer, a lamp, or empty hands? Do not rush to conclusions. The soul does not live in conclusions. It lives in symbols, in expressions, in the ambiguous forms that reason cannot possess, you will know you are on the right path when images come alive. When you feel something older than language breathing through you, individuation is not about becoming the best self in the modern sense. It is about becoming whole. And wholeness does not mean goodness. It means completeness, encompassing light and darkness, reason and instinct, understanding and the unconscious. And when you reach that point, the center of the mandala, you will no longer need validation. For when the shadow is illuminated, it is no longer a shadow. It becomes a sacred image. Nietzsche went far and did not return. But thanks to him, I knew the path could be walked to its end. And I, through my own darkness, through Salome, through the dark figure in my dreams, returned with light in hand, not the light of salvation, but the light of inner understanding. You can do this too. Begin with last night's dream. Draft it, write it, as if it were a map of the soul. And if you do not dream, sit still, close your eyes and ask, who are you within me? Whispering in the darkness, you may hear nothing at first, but a symbol will come, an image, a feeling, a color, a fate movement. Trust it. Do not ask what it means. That question will come later. For now, you are stepping onto the second path. The path not of reason, but of transformation. I do not promise you will find peace, but you will find the center, and there you will understand that the abyss is not where you die. It is where you are born anew, not as someone else, but as yourself, a whole. For the first time, there is one thing you will realize when you have crossed the abyss and returned. You are no longer the person you were. But you cannot return as a saint, a sage, or a mythical figure. You return with empty hands, but your eyes, oh, your eyes will see the world in a way no one else can. That is the gaze of the symbol bearer. When you emerge from the abyss, if you have truly descended, faced it, listened, every small thing in this world becomes a symbolic doorway. The chair you sit on, the bird you hear in the morning, the wind through a crack in the door, all can evoke an image of a soul restored from the darkness. I once wrote, man does not possess a psyche, man is a psyche. When you have entered the inner forest, every relationship, every choice, every hesitation or inspiration becomes a living image connecting the individual to the whole. Then, and you no longer live because you must. You live because the life within you seeks expression. You do not need to find meaning. You are the meaning being lived. I call this the lived symbol. Not the symbol you learn from books, not the archetype you note from my lectures, but the symbol that rises from your dreams, from the moment you tremble while journaling after a therapy session, from the time you cannot hold back tears, reading an old poem that once meant nothing. Nietzsche called such a person one who has overcome themselves, but I do not believe you need to overcome. I believe you need only return to the circle, to the mandala, to the center no one names, but you always feel in dreams, in darkness, in the deepest solitude, and in the quietest fullness. And when you bring the symbol back to the world, then you no longer need to interpret. Your presence is a ritual, a small act, holding the hand of someone in pain, smiling at a child, writing a journal entry after a nightmare can be the first step for someone else standing at their own abyss. And so the spiral continues. No, there is no end. Individuation is not a destination, but a way of being, a cycle of transformation, a spiral path. Each time you think you are complete, that is when a dream will whisper a new symbol. And the journey begins again. I have lived my entire life in that cycle. And I know if you have listened to me this far, that cycle is calling you to. You do not need to understand everything now. You only need to step, one step, like Orpheus, one stroke, like me, one question, who are you within me? And then listen. If you ask me what the soul's first language is, I will not answer in writing or speech. I will point to the night where dreams whisper in the darkness. Dreams, to me, are not biological reactions or mere products of a recovering mind. Dreams are the oldest conversation between the finite self and the unformed whole, between the individual and the collective unconscious. I have spent decades listening to dreams, not only my own, but those of lost souls who came to my room with weary eyes, trembling hands, and an unformed question. They told me of strange dreams, a dead father returning as a talking wolf, a door appearing between familiar walls, a child forgotten in a wasteland. And each time, I did not interpret, I listened as if their souls spoke in a primal language that consciousness could not break. You may ask, how do I understand a dream? But understand is the wrong word. No one understands a dream through logic. A dream must be lived with like an unfinished song, an incomplete painting, a ritual whose meaning you grasp only after performing it. I have seen. If you sit down each morning after waking and write your dream, without judgment, without rationalizing, you are performing a profound act of healing. That is when you tell the soul, I am listening. And when the soul is heard, it responds not with solutions, but with images, and images are the compass guiding you through the forest. Imagine, you dream, you stand on a ship in a sea of fog, you see no shore, only a lantern hangs at the ship's bow. In waking life, you may face a great decision, but instead of rushing to find direction, ask, how bright is the lantern? Does it comfort or unsettle me? Am I alone on the ship? Those details, seemingly trivial, are the unconscious whispering. And in the humility of listening, the dream becomes a map. Nietzsche did not write of dreams, but he dreamed in daylight grand dreams in the form of Zarathustra. The Übermensch, the child bearing the spiral. I choose to dream in the darkness, where images carry no words, where I am a student of the unconscious, and I invite you, write down your most recent dream. Do not try to understand it. Draft it, place it before you. Then sit in silence. You will see the shadow appears, not to haunt, but to be known. And from there, the path opens, not the path of logic, not the path of morality, but the path of the symbol. And when you walk it, you live not for the world, but for the soul. That I could continue with part 8, the death of the old gods and the birth of the living symbol, where I would discuss the post-Nietzschean era, the crisis of modern mythology, and how modern humanity needs a new symbol that does not take the form of old religion. Nietzsche wrote, "We have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers." When I first read those lines, I was not offended. I was shaken not by the affront to divinity, but by the desperate depths of Nietzsche's gaze into the spiritual state of modern humanity. I do not believe Nietzsche truly wished to kill God. He loved the flame too much to extinguish it. He was too enamored with the sacred to become a mere blasphemer. Instead, he performed what I call the prophetic act of the shadow. He spoke what the collective felt, but dared not name. Nietzsche was the symbol of the Western collective soul. In the moment of the collapse of the sacred symbol, he was the first to hear the breaking of the bridge between the soul and the divine. And I understand. The death of God is not a philosophical statement, but a profound spiritual phenomenon. It is a moment when the image of the divine no longer carries a living symbol. It still exists in churches, in scriptures, in rituals, but it no longer touches the depths of the soul. A living symbol is one that makes the psyche tremble upon encountering it, one that makes you dream, cry, change, and when the symbol no longer lives, it dies, whether people still worship it or not. When the image of the divine dies, what happens? A void opens, an abyss. Nothing holds the ego steady amidst the winds of doubt. Then Nietzsche spoke of the Übermensch as a new symbol, but here he fell into paradox. He sought a new symbol, but by rejecting symbolic energy, he used reason, the will to power, negation, to erect an image to replace God without passing through the symbolic death of the ego. And that is why he, like many moderns shattered in the journey, I do not blame him. He walked ahead of his time, but I understand. After the death of God, we do not need a new symbol to dominate the soul. We need a living symbol, an image rising from the collective unconscious, carrying sacred energy without the old religious structures. It could be the image of a child sitting still amidst ruins, a serpent swallowing its tail, Ouroboros, a white flame burning without smoke, a vibrating mandala. I have seen all these images in visions, in patients' dreams, in the frenzied drawings of souls on the verge of collapse. And I know these images carry the breath of a new living symbol, not of religion, not of science, but of the soul as it is. When a living symbol appears, you will not need to interpret it. You will feel it with your heart, your flesh. Your silence, it does not say do this or do that. It simply exists, and its existence makes it impossible to remain as you were. Thus, I do not seek to build a new God. I do not create doctrines, nor do I destroy them. I only listen in the abyss, in dreams, in the darkness, waiting for a living image to arise. And when it comes, I do not rush to grasp it. I let it live. I draw it. I speak to it. I write of it, as I write now, so that you, reading this, may learn to recognize your own living symbol. You need not be a believer, nor a philosopher. You need only keep a stillness in your soul quiet enough to hear when the soul whispers, I am still here. I am not dead. I am only waiting for an image true enough to embody me once more. And you will realize the light has never gone out. It was only obscured by old images that no longer live. And now is the time for you to become the symbol bearer. Not to preach, but to live